Good evening, all. I'd like to welcome you to this evening's licensing committee. Before I hand over to Councillor Plouvier, the chair, I would just like to remind you of the protocol for this evening. Can I ask that you only speak when invited to do so by the chair? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking, apart from the chair, who does not need to mute her mic at any stage to ensure that the meeting is conducted effectively. When speaking, please be succinct. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in a report, please refer to the page number. If you are having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you now, Councillor Plouvier.
Lovely, thank you, Natalie. Welcome everybody to licensing. As I said, my internet
came out for a second.
Sorry, I think we need to just mute. Can we? Okay, cool. Yeah, my internet's been playing up, so let's just hope that it's works reasonably for everybody through this meeting. Okay, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Smith. Is there anybody else? Natalie, do we have anybody else?
I haven't received any other. Sorry, Councillor Selman. I've received Councillor.
Okay, cool.
Councillor Selman.
Brilliant. Do we have any declarations of interest? Nope. Great. So moving on to minutes of the previous meeting. Are we okay for accuracy of the minutes? If everybody's got those. And just going on to anything that people wanted to raise from them that's not covered by tonight. I don't think there is, because the topics are the same. Anybody want to raise anything about the minutes? Okay, so we can in that case approve those minutes from the last licensing committee. Thank you very much, colleagues. Okay, moving swiftly on to the licensing service annual report. And I think, David Tuitt, are you going to introduce the report for us? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, I'm going to present the report. So hopefully the technology works and I can present my screen. Hope everyone can see that. Is that okay, everyone? Able to see that screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just quickly walk through it. So this is the annual report. So our figures and the numbers that we received of various activities carried out in the financial year 1920. So just running through the report itself. This first chart is the number of licenses that were granted in the year. So just over 80, which is slightly less than the previous year, but fairly consistent with the figures and showing a continued trend, if you like, of the numbers overall falling in the last 5 years. And variations slightly up on the previous year, but again, the overall trend is that the numbers of licenses varied each year remains fairly consistent. So those two charts obviously are licenses that can end up at licensing subcommittee, and in a lot of cases they do, but also quite a few examples where licenses are issued under delegated authority. So minor variations, just a decrease on the number last year, but we did see a tail end of the introduction of the late night levy. That's that big spike in 2017 and 18. And we saw a bit of a continuation of that last financial year. But numbers have again stabilised, and we expect that trend to continue. These are lesser applications, if you like, for licensing committees, but generally variations to specified DPS stays consistent. Likewise with transfer applications and also temporary event notices. So we still get a high number of temporary event notices each year, just over 2,000 in the last 12-month period, financial year period. So, so you can see there that that number remains consistent. The review applications, exactly the same amount in the last financial year as the previous one, just 4 applications. Review applications, of course, would always end up at subcommittee. And this is just a desktop exercise which we carry out. So requests where someone wishes to change some details, we receive a number of those each year. And personal licenses, that you can see from that chart, it's showing a consistent fall in the number of personal licenses granted each year, just slightly over 250 in the past 12 months. Again, personal license changes and detail changes. So that's again another consistent number with the previous year. Subcommittee hearings, fairly consistent, no real changes there, just slightly above 40 subcommittee hearings took place. And that's it really for Licensing Act 2003. So fairly consistent, I'd say, in terms of numbers, no real surprises. And but we'll wait to see what the impact of ongoing events will have going forward and on the figures when we next produce this report. All right, so looking at Gambling Act 2005. So we did see a fall in the number of licenses renewed, particularly betting shops. So this was the first full year where the change to the stakes and prizes limits kicked in for the B2 gaming machine. So you can see that we had just over 50 licenses in the year 18-19, and this dropped to just under 40 in 2019/2020. I think from memory, it's mainly Ladbrokes and William Hill as operators that surrendered licenses. Some of the smaller operators in Hackney haven't actually changed their numbers, but those two are I think the fairly large operators in the UK. They surrendered quite a few of their licenses. I think since the start of this financial year, this current year, we've had a couple more licenses be surrendered. So those will be reflected in next year's report. Okay, so massage and special treatment licenses. We saw a significant fall last year, so we knew we had to do some work around getting those license numbers back. So that involved a project undertaken by one of my colleagues in the team. We can see that's we've returned a number of licenses, MST licenses, back to where it should be. So that's slightly less than 90 licensed businesses able to carry out special treatment. And I'll show you in the chart later on how that's reflected on the number of registered massage and special treatment practitioners. So overall, the summary of key activities slightly up last year on the previous year, but only a slight change, but showing a trend that it's increasing over the last 5 years. All right, so just to very briefly look at some of the projects we worked on, we developed the late night levy, and Samantha will be giving a bit of an update on that shortly. We did a bit more work on digital transformation. Our key project which we're working on is to use a process called robotic process automation which will automate the temporary event notice process and allow us to make some resource savings there. But that's an ongoing piece of work at the moment. Some members will remember discussions about a pre-application advice scheme, which we were looking to pilot. We didn't actually progress that work this year, so that's on hold for the moment. The animal welfare function, so there were changes to the animal welfare licenses, if you like. So we had to introduce a new fee structure for that, receive new regulations, and we've had a number of new license applications for that. And so that's a developing piece of work as we move forward. And so what we've got planned for this forthcoming year is to continue with the work around digital transformation, look for further efficiency savings, trying to reduce some of the paper-based work that we're still doing, still quite heavy weight when it comes to paper-based work. We want to reintroduce an inspection regime, or certainly increase the number of inspections that we carry out, which has fallen back over the last few years. We're still to do some work around the evaluation of the impact of the current statement of licensing policy. This was a commitment we gave when that licensing policy was introduced, but some of that work couldn't take place due to the backlog of decisions being published. But where we've started to catch up on those now, we should be able to bring that piece of work forward. And finally, fees review. It's good practice recommended by the LGA for us to keep our fees under review. And so we aim to do a comprehensive review of the locally set fees this year, and that work will be in around October time. So that's that. Just so on the summary table, just wanted to show you this top line here. So the number of valid premises licenses as of 31st of March, there's 1,149, so slightly less than the previous year. You can see it's not available in previous years. So this is partly due to a change in the way we collected fees, and it's a lot easier for us now to see exactly how many licenses we had. We actually think this figure's slightly less because you'll recall we just went into the lockdown just before the end of the financial year, so that would have impacted on the number of licenses that were just being renewed around that time. So I actually think the number will have increased slightly, but we'll find that out in due course. And the other thing I wanted just to show in this table was in relation to massage and special treatment. So it's the third line from the bottom there. You can see the massage and special treatment practitioner registration. It increased by 130% from 87 in the previous year, 87 registrations to 200 in the most recent complete financial year. This was because we changed the process to name the practitioner on the licenses. So this has led to a massive increase in the number of practitioners that had to be licensed, and but my expectation is that number will fall off this coming year. That's it really in terms of the statistics and the numbers, etc. Just quickly going through review applications. As I mentioned before, we've got 4 in the year, and those are just very briefly detailed there at the end of the presentation. So that's that. I guess it's questions now, if I have any. Stop sharing.
Yes, thank you very much, David. That's great. Have I got questions? Councillor Bell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, am I online?
Yeah.
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 Okay. David, I want to ask, when the inspection regime is up again and running, how many inspections are we talking about in each period? And have you obviously liaised with the enforcement service to make sure they are ready when you take these on?
Yeah, so we'll have to set a number. I mean, we used to be able to do inspections in the hundreds in previous years, but I don't expect it to be that high. But I would like us to be able to do a proportion of inspections for premises under Licensing Act, under Gambling Act, MST premises, etc. But we're not as advanced as setting a number for it just yet. A lot of the forward planning we're about to do has had to be put on hold just because of the current situation that we're in. So I didn't get as far as setting numbers for particular activities, but I hope to do so in the near future.
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Bell? Yeah?
Yeah. Yes, fine.
Councillor Snell, Peter?
Sorry, managed to get there in the end. Okay, on the report, on the appendix, the table of activity, can you just talk us through this lotteries registered? What exactly is that bit of legislation, and why are there so many of them? Oh, should I jot the page? It's on page 15 of the appendix, the licensing report for the year.
So small lotteries, small society lotteries.
I guess so.
Yeah, so small society lotteries. Okay, yeah, that's increased to 200 from 5 to 18. So a small society lottery is a non-commercial lottery. So often they're used for fundraising activities. So we get them from places like churches, school committees, school governor committees, fates, that sort of thing. So it's used for fundraising activities when subject to certain rules in relation to the prize limits and being able to sell tickets in advance, and quite small prizes. I'm trying to think of the limits here, but the certain limits apply to how much prizes can be valued, etc.
So when my club runs its bingo sessions, they don't have to get a license for that?
It depends, councillor. Is there money at stake? Is it how often is it running? Bingo is slightly different from small lotteries. So bingo is gaming of put me on a spot here, but bingo is gaming, where a lottery is a different section in the Gambling Act based on a draw being made, a tombola, that sort of thing.
We always used to lose a fortune on it, so I'd be very glad if I was told we shouldn't do it without a license. But anyway, pass on. I'll ask you, so I'll drop you an email. Thanks.
Okay.
Councillor Peters, did you have a question? Whoops, something's happened to my screen. Yeah.
Yes, I was actually going to ask about lotteries as well, but in that schedule, there's also adult gaming centres. I was wondering what they were. And then just to touch on the digital transformation, could you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that just going to be changes to back office functions, or are we also going to make it easier for applicants and indeed members of the public to interact with the licensing service? And then, if I may, one last thing, just on the pre-application advice system, what's happened there? Why aren't we taking that forward? Because it doesn't look as if we are going to be taking it forward this year, or planning to, in any case.
Okay, thank you, councillor. First question, adult gaming centres. We don't have many of those, but you may have occasionally seen, you see them. There's one on Mayor Street, the narrow way, called Casino. It used to be called Quicksilver, and it's effectively like an arcade, an old style arcade, and you can go in there, or adults can go in there and play arcade games that will give prizes, pay prizes, but they're not the same as the machines that you would have seen in betting shops. So they're a different category. B3, I believe it is, with a prize limit up to 500, but a bigger stake, and they're a lot slower in the rate that they pay out. So we do have two. I think we've just recently got an application for a new one, but we don't have very many of those. And they're actually a bit similar to what you might see at motorway services. So if you go to motorway services, often they have, or I often notice motorway services having adult gaming centres or sections of the services where it's adults only and it's an adult gaming centre. The second question was digital transformation.
Yeah.
So some of it might have impact on front office, but it's mainly back office functions. So the temporary event notices, the robotics is something we've really wanted to do because of it would just free up a considerable amount of time for officers if we're able to get that to work successfully. We're able to make some incremental efficiency savings here and there, but I think overall for us to make some real significant changes, we would have to look at changing our database completely. So that would be a bigger project for the future. But because I am the team leader for two teams, so licensing is one, but technical support is the other. So on the technical support side, we're doing some work around food business registration, automating that, and doing some other work around streamlining some of those processes there, just to find some efficiency savings. And the last question was about the pre-application advice scheme. That work. It just, if I'm honest, the officers, we just didn't have enough time to really sit down and design it and get it to work in a way that was satisfactory. So it's a piece of work which would like to maybe revisit again in the future. But for now, I think it's just it's something that we're just going to put a halt on at the moment.
Okay. Any follow-ups or any other questions people want to ask? Penny, Councillor Root.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, as a relative newcomer to this, why there is this steady decline in personal licences over the years, which continues. And I also was wondering, leading on from that, whether you've done any work to work out which area of your work is the biggest cost in terms of staff time, and if any of these changes are having any impact on that at all.
Okay, so personal license is the first question. Yeah, it has shown a steady decrease. Not really sure why. I can't really answer that question. It's just so you apply for a personal license in the borough where you live, and we've just seen a consistent fall in that number. But I can't really give an answer to that. I just don't know. I think it's a few years now since the requirement to renew personal licenses was abolished. But even so, that wouldn't affect the overall number. So yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I don't actually know the reason for that. And then the second question in relation to cost. Well, I guess licensing Act 2003 activities take up the most of our time, contribute the most, if you like, of our resources, just with the volume of work that generates. But we've never really looked at it. I mean, we've got the slide which looks at the key activities. But these are just in terms of actual numbers, actual touch points in the database, rather than hourly calculations, etc., anything like that. So that's something to think about, and maybe something we could produce in the future, because we do have to do some work around hours calculations when it comes to fee setting. So that is maybe something I can think about presenting in future.
One of the things we have reduced is the number of subcommittees, probably proportionately more than the reduction in the number of applications. So 40 a year is 30% down from, it used to be in the 60s a few years ago, 50 to 60. So it's gone down quite a lot, which is was sort of the intention of the licensing policies, to try and make it easier for people to apply for a license that they might get without a hearing, because hearings are quite expensive. That's why I'm saying that. So that's one thing I think we have probably saved a bit on over the years. I don't know if you agree, David. I don't know how much of a proportion license subcommittees are. They do take a lot of time.
They do. They can take a lot of time, and the report writing is it's been a particular bugbear, I think, for Mike and some colleagues for a little while. So that's something that we'll probably look at as well, to see. Members will know that often the report that's published, by the time it actually gets to the hearing, a lot has changed. But in those cases, we've already written the report and prepared and attached all of the appendices. So that's something that we'd probably look at, trying to see if we can make that a bit less labour intensive, and maybe find some way to cut down the initial preparation of the report, especially where we know that it's likely to change a lot before or by the time it actually gets to the hearing.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for David on the annual report before we move on? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that, David. Thank you to licensing for another year. You have applause in the corner there, silent applause. Okay. Moving on then to the late night levy. And who wants to start me off on the late night levy?
Thank you, Chair.
Great.
Yeah, I would like to just to provide a brief verbal update given the current crisis.
Cool.
So I'll just go ahead. So all future projects funded by the late night levy have been put on hold until we receive more clarity on the way forward. We've delayed sending renewal letters where the businesses have had to close under coronavirus regulations, specifically bars, pubs, nightclubs, and other late night venues. This position will be reviewed again at the end of June and may need to be extended further depending on the national picture. The police are continuing to work with us throughout the crisis, ensuring the security of our licensed premises and preparing and enhancing safe trading practices for businesses. And we're also engaging with licensees virtually during this period and holding sessions in partnership with communications and culture offices. And we're working on a COVID-19 recovery plan with various departments within the council. We've also set a virtual late night levy board meeting, which will be held on July 2nd.
Thank you. Questions about that? Councillor Snell.
Well, just to repeat, I think what I said at my last meeting, I mean, Sam is a fantastic ambassador for licensing. I certainly went to one Dalston pub watch, and there she was, and she's a real popular asset. People can see something positive coming out of licensing. We're not just a policeman all the time. But also, one thing I have noticed is that she's become the conduit for sending out all the business support advice that we've been putting out through COVID-19, all the links to how you report and how you ask for grants and all that sort of thing. So, so well done, Samantha. You are real, and I think they're even going to start liking paying that levy. You know.
Thank you, Councillor Snell.
Yes,
I've got a question, Kat.
Yes, go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, right. Thanks. I wasn't sure if you were saying. Sorry about earlier. Yeah, I know everything's been put on hold, but looking at the minutes of the December meeting, it talks about the work on urinals, which is quite topical, I suppose, with what's been happening in perhaps London Fields and other parts. It says 5K has been allocated to urinal consultation and signage in hotspots. So that was December. Obviously, I just wondered what had happened. Some of that work should have been done before COVID came into our lives. And are they only male urinals, or do we have any for females?
So yes, we were in very early stages before this lockdown happened. So it's a very long process. Unfortunately, everything has been put on hold at the moment. So it hasn't been moved forward past the lockdown, essentially. There will be work going into it later in the year when the nighttime economy comes back. But for the moment, everything is paused.
Yeah. We did do some work on it though. So we looked at quotes and looked at various options, and the temporary urinals that are put out at the moment, they are only for males. So I'm trying to think now where there's a system for females to temporarily a provision for females that's available. So we did some work and spoke to colleagues in hygiene services about that, but as Samantha says, it literally got to the March and we could see what was about to happen, and that work stopped, along with quite a lot of other pieces of work.
That's a shame, because I would have thought it was something you could pursue ready for when the clubs reopen, so that they're in place.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood, though, for portable urinals is quite a lengthy consultation period. So, and possibly at more stages. So we haven't done a lot of internal consultation with colleagues in various service areas. Spoken to hygiene services, but not formally to street scene, to planning, to other services, regeneration, etc. So a lot of that work needs to be done first before we could have really gone forward with the portable urinals.
Question?
Sorry, Emma, was that you bringing me in?
Yes, I was it.
Sorry, it broke up.
Sharon's
It was at my end. Yeah, no, sorry. It was just to quickly flag, Sharon, in relation to your point about whether it was worth getting on with things in sort of the meantime. I guess I just wanted to note that Sam has been doing sort of different bits of work around about things like the training portal, but there's been a careful balance, which is that we don't want to incur any additional cost as against the levy until we've got a better sense of what's going on, which is partly because understandably there's the anxiety, I guess, amongst levy payers at the moment about financial situations, etc. So we've got a levy board coming up, as Sam was saying, at the start of July, and that can help us to work out what it is that we should or shouldn't be prioritising going forward. But I guess it was just to note that it isn't a sort of lack of effort in terms of exploring it. It's about a desire about not wanting to commit to or incur or put sort of lots of sort of resource towards exploring things where there are a lot of uncertainties going forward around about things. That was all.
Okay, Councillor Gordon, did you have a question?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's probably slightly beyond the scope of this committee, but a couple of other speakers have touched on it. I mean, I was just wondering whether the licensing officers really could comment on the sort of overall situation and health of the licensing industry in our borough. Is obviously a very big part of our economy and a big employer. I just wondered whether they've got any insights into how it's doing at the moment and what the future holds.
We're going to touch on some of this in the closed session afterwards, but it's we're hearing various different things. I mean, I've personally spoken to a few operators, some more upbeat than others. some doing various things to get a bit of revenue in this lockdown period. Some thinking quite creatively, a couple thinking a bit too creatively in some cases. But yeah, the overall health, I mean, it's like we've heard it so many times, I think, you know, it just depends how long this goes on for. A lot of people are looking forward to the July, June, possibly, for opening, and you know, if it extends beyond that, then it could be quite, you know, it might be a big struggle for quite a few businesses to return from a much prolonged closure. Don't know, Samantha, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the next few weeks are going to be key in kind of telling what's going to be the way forward. So, I mean, we're collating a lot of business impact surveys at the moment, and I think we're still kind of trying to go through all of that and see what the guidelines will be in the next few weeks to really have a clearer picture of the current landscape.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? James,
yeah, hi. Just a few things on the minutes. I think it would be helpful for the list of those people, the attendees, to also say against each who they are, what their role is. At the end of the minutes, there's also reference to 2 further intervening meetings, but I think that from what you're saying, those things didn't happen. So I was just that confused me slightly. But really, my question is, could you tell us a little bit more about the Hackney Night and positive development? Oh,
sorry, I couldn't quite catch it.
Hackney Night. Someone shuffling papers.
Yeah.
So Hackney Nights, could you tell us about that?
Sure. So Hackney Nights became really kind of, I don't want to say brand, but it became sort of the vehicle for which we would deliver safety information to the general public in the ways of public awareness campaigns, but also to tie in all the activities we're doing behind the scenes with businesses in regards to training. So an example I could give was the Sexual Harassment Week campaign we did. So there would always be a public awareness element to it, but also we would be training up venues, etc. And it would all be kind of under that same umbrella of Hackney Nights, which is kind of a safety charter, if you will, which allowed us to kind of group everything together nicely. There was a lot of campaigns planned for this year, but obviously with the current climate, we've had to shelve all those. But hopefully, when everything comes back, you'll see campaigns in those kind of, so sexual harassment. We were planning something around hate crime as well in the nighttime economy. So hopefully, when everything bounces back, you'll see more activities under that umbrella.
Okay, anybody else got a question for Samantha?
Can I come in quickly, Emma?
Yeah, sure. Go, Samantha.
Hi, Samantha and David. I'm not sure who.
You've turned your mic off.
I'll start again. I'm not sure which of the 2 of you would answer this, or if it's possible to do so at the moment, or maybe you might need to go away and think about it. But so during lockdown, obviously lots of premises, as you say, have been trying to generate some revenue and keep their businesses going. And obviously, as a whole, we need to balance that against obviously public health situation. So my first question is, as and when lockdown restrictions are lifted and, you know, pubs open, I'm thinking during the day rather than any particular nighttime activity, what proactive or preemptive measures do we have in place to obviously help people to open their businesses and get some money coming in, but also to safeguard the public, thinking of kind of local pubs and restaurants, all those places which some of them are selling off sales, which is, it's a lot safer than them having people in their premises. But obviously post lockdown, that's something that we'll need to have. If we don't have a policy in place to deal with that, then what are we planning to do at that point? My second question is, again, kind of related to post-lockdown activity. we obviously have a mixture of different types of licensed premises. Many of those are small businesses, which might be corner shops and so on, which will tend to be owned by BME business owners. And I'm just wondering what support we're going to provide to those people in particular post-lockdown, to kind of, so some of those have been, for example, continuing to open. What businesses do we have in place to support them to either kind of adjust to the new reality, given the space that they have, and the sometimes difficult, or from their own perspective, different interactions that they would have compared to the larger businesses in places like Shoreditch.
Do you want me to take that one, David?
You take the first question, I'll take the second question.
Sure. So there is a lot of work going on. So there's a department in the council, the Hackney Business Network, that's led through the communications office, that is leading on most of these initiatives, and that's most to do with the guidance, the plans, the recovery plan, and how to communicate that to business owners, not just licensees. But we are working jointly with them and the culture office to kind of stay on top of things, and we send out regular communications. We are putting together detailed packs and guidance for these, but we are also awaiting in the next few weeks the detailed guidelines about licensed premises specifically, because so far we've only received the general business directives, which won't necessarily apply in once the licensed premise trade continues.
Very quickly, so at what point would we get to see that as a committee?
Yes, I mean, it's available. It's all available online.
Officers in a different part of the council are working on it, and it may not be within the scope of this committee, but it's obviously something that we'd need to be aware of and perhaps take a view on. Conscious there's been a little bit of criticism around some of the, I mean, I don't think it's anybody's fault, but I think the licensing regime is not particularly nimble in responding to, the fallout of businesses wanting to remain open, but then the public health implications of their behaviour, and it becomes somebody else's problem.
David, do you want to deal with that? Because
yeah,
quickly, because I think we've been over this.
Yeah. So the government are producing sector-specific COVID, as they call it, COVID secure guidelines. So we've not seen anything yet for what they class as non-essential businesses, but we have seen it for offices, for shops, for takeaways, factories, that sort of thing. So essentially those types of businesses that are able to operate now and aren't under any sort of closure restrictions or closure requirements. And yeah, so as I say, I would expect quite quickly before they actually kick in, the government to publish them, because as you've seen throughout this crisis, there's not a lot of time to adjust to various things. So if using the 4th of July as an example, if the Prime Minister or the government announces on that Sunday that pubs can reopen on the 4th, I would expect, my expectation is that the notice period will be as short as that, will be from the next day that they can open. I think that's what we've seen throughout this crisis. So I'd personally be quite surprised if anything changes from that at this stage. But if it does, we'll probably only have a couple of weeks to get the secure guidelines and study and understand them ourselves, then direct businesses to them.
Okay, thank you.
Your second question was in relation to smaller businesses. So
the
types that have been able to run throughout. I think just generally colleagues across enforcement have been visiting those sorts of businesses. So whether those be enforcement officers uniformed or colleagues in trade and standards, colleagues in environmental health and environmental protection, they've been working throughout. So they've been going to places like newsagents and small grocery stores, etc. as well as some of the other businesses that were able to carry on operating that aren't necessarily licensed businesses, but were able to carry on operating throughout. So giving advice, giving out signage. You see it more and more often now, people marking out spaces for around social distancing, limiting the numbers of people in their premises, all of that sort of thing. So I expect that to continue as we start to see more and more businesses opening up. So a new tranche of businesses will be able to open up from the 15th. And I expect colleagues in those service areas to start visiting those sorts of premises as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Sorry, anybody else want to ask questions about the late night levy or anything else that's... No? Okay.
I think Sharon had a question.
Oh, sorry, Sharon. Yes, sorry, I knew.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually a follow-up from that, in a sense that the government's talking about doing away with tables and chairs licenses and allowing businesses to put tables and chairs out almost anywhere they want, which would cause lots of problems for people with disabilities, people with pushchairs, all sorts of things, as well as the general public being pushed into the road, maybe. I know it hasn't been decided yet, but I know it's happened in other European countries, and there's a chance that the government may do it and probably not give us much notice. I wondered whether you had thought about the implications of it and the consultative perhaps with other colleagues in other teams, and it might be that pavements might need to be widened like they have done to allow safe queuing outside some of our businesses. So I just wonder whether you thought about that. It may happen, it may not happen, but there is and I don't know whether the government, I haven't heard the government talk about any changes in the licensing laws apart from that, but unless you've heard anything, I haven't. But the other question I was going to ask before that came up was about Operation Lagana, which looks fairly successful in Shoreditch. And I just wondered whether it was only it was run in Shoreditch because that's where the problem was, or that's where the funding was, and whether it was needed elsewhere in the borough like Dalston, or is it less of an issue in Dalston? Obviously, I realise it's not, the problem isn't happening at the moment because most of the pubs and clubs are shut.
Do you want to take that first question about Lagana, Samantha?
Okay, sure. So Operation Lagana, it was predominantly focused in Shoreditch, but there was still presence across the borough. So there were still visits being made. It just so happens that that Shoreditch has later operating hours. So often what you would see is they would do visits in other parts of the borough, but always sort of end up between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. would be focused in Shoreditch because that's where mostly the premises that were open were. But yeah, it was across the borough, but it was just because of the nature of Shoreditch and all the nightclubs and the nighttime economy there. That's why the focus was put there.
I was thinking more of the police activity, in the sense of dealing with people who are being robbed at ATMs and things.
So Shoreditch is a hotspot for us in the borough. So based on where the crime patterns happened and the hotspots that emerged, they would adapt the policing strategy to that. So it'd always be evidence-based.
Thanks.
Just in answer to the question about tables and chairs and shop fronts, it's not a function that we administer directly, but we do work and liaise with colleagues over in markets who do carry out that activity. So shop front trading permits and tables and chairs permits, etc., under London Local Authorities Act, I believe it is. So I've heard the rumours as well, and you'll see that when we touch on it in the after in the private session, that it's something that's been mooted. That it might be that premises can use more of outdoor space whether that be private or public space. So it's just another one of these things that are rumoured to be happening, but we don't know for sure if it will happen. I think if it does happen, it will create, as you say, a lot of challenges for us, which is why I would be a bit surprised if it does happen. We have so many narrow pavements and then wide pavements and pavements which would get licenses and pavements that wouldn't get licenses. So if the government were to just do a blanket approach, it would be very, very difficult to deal with. So we'll wait and see, but I'd be a bit surprised if the government just did away with it completely. Even temporarily, I'd be a bit surprised if that were to happen, because as you say, people visually impaired, pushchairs, disabled people do have a lot of issues with highway obstructions.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions on the? No. Okay. In that case, if there's any other business.
Chair, just before we move on, so for future late night levy updates, we're just going to change it slightly from just presenting the minutes to presenting a quarterly update. So we'll divide the year into quarters and just give an update on each quarter. So things like the financial update and highlights of the activity during that previous quarter, which will all build up to the final report at the end of each levy year.
Great, thank you. That's excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, the only other thing I wanted to say under any other business was that Butter, our licensing lawyer for many years, was unable to attend the last licensing committee meeting because it wasn't held, because it was one of the first things that got cancelled before we went into lockdown, or at about the same time as we went into lockdown. So I just wanted to flag up that Butter had sent to all of us an email thanking committee members particularly very much for a long working relationship over many years, and I would like to express our thanks to Butter for his outstanding contribution to licensing. I'm sure we'll miss him very much. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Amanda or David. I'm not quite sure. I have an email from him which was addressed to members. I'm not sure if everybody's had it. I've certainly seen it before. Did everybody get that? Because if they didn't, I will get that forwarded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and a number of people also attended his leaving do, and I think that probably pays or reflects the affection and respect in which he was held.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And said,
Natalie, I think. Oh, sorry, David.
He said he actually sent a message just before we started to wish us luck for, or he sent me a message to wish us luck for today's meeting. So yeah, he's still very much thinking of us in Hackney.
That's him. Well, he's promised to come back to a licensing committee when things are a bit more normal and we're allowed to sort of travel unnecessarily in that way. So we'll look forward to that. Okay. In that case, over to Natalie to close the live meeting, and we're moving then into a private discussion session.